episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show with another truly fascinating individual helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. We are honored today to be joined by Brett Vaughan, who is the United States Navy Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer and also Artificial Intelligence Portfolio Manager at the Office of Naval Research. Brett has 30 years of defense intelligence and technology expertise with strength in military support, strategic communications, geospatial intelligence, naval intelligence, and Navy R&D. Brett spent 2 decades in various roles at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, an additional 10 years in intelligence roles in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, and he was recently appointed to his current role as head of AI at ONR in 2019. Brett has master's degrees in environmental science from Johns Hopkins, in national security and strategic studies at the Naval War College, and his bachelor's degree was in geography and cartography from the University of Mary Washington. And just as a little background, from some previous discussions, the United States Office of Naval Research, organization within the U.S. Department of the Navy, responsible for science and technology programs in the U.S. Navy Marine Corps. It was established back in 1946 to plan, foster, and encourage scientific research, and has a long, prestigious history, including the development of the first United States radar systems, the first synthetic lubricants, and surveillance satellites. Brett Vaughan, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come talk to us a little bit today.
My pleasure, Ira. Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much. Typically, Brett, we like to start off by handing our guests the floor just for a little bit to talk about themselves. If you could take a few minutes to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background, and a little bit of your path to date, starting from being a cartographer in Virginia Beach to ultimately this extremely important Office of Defense and Security Sciences. That'd be a great way to get going.
Okay, sure. So I am born and raised in Hampton, Virginia. For folks not familiar with the area, that's down the Tidewater region. If you go to Richmond, Virginia, and head towards Williamsburg, you'll hit Newport News, then you'll hit Hampton at the end of the peninsula. Across the water is Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Norfolk, of course, the home of the Navy, our Navy fleet. So I spent a lot of time around the water growing up, and probably partially explains my my fascination and wonder with the sea services and the ocean. Also, my father was a World War II veteran that in the Navy. That probably played a role as well. Always loved the beach, loved the water. So grew up in Hampton. Went to college at the University of Mary Washington. It was Mary Washington College at the time I was there. I actually went with the intention of being an art major. It was interesting and a kind of an interesting story about how that changed. But I've shifted over in the course of my first year towards geography. I took some Russian language. It was a really interesting mix. I think I gravitated towards geography because I was fascinated with sciences, but I also wanted to keep that artistic piece along with it. And I saw cartography and geography. Back then, we actually did draw maps by hand, and it was not a lot of computers and digital cartography like we have today. But so there was an artistic element to it. So I went down that path. One of the people that was a big influence in my life there was my geography advisor, my professor there, Richard Palmieri, who was a major influence on me. He did most of his graduate work in Nepal and with that region of the globe, and it was just fascinating. And he was just a wonderful character. But anyway, if you were a geography major at Mary Washington, 9 out of 10 majors would end up working for what was then the Defense Mapping Agency when you graduated. So that was the trajectory I was headed on. After I graduated, I had to wait to get my security clearance. There was a rather lengthy period there where you wait for that. So that explains why I went back to Virginia Beach while I was waiting, and took a job as a cartographer for the city of Virginia Beach for about a year. That was a fascinating and a very fun time for me. And then once I got my clearance, I came back up to the Northern Virginia area and Washington, D.C., and started with the Defense Mapping Agency. I started, my initial jobs were on the cartography mapping side. And then after about probably 7 years, I shifted into more of a military liaison role with the agency. That's when I first took a duty station in the Pentagon with the Joint Staff. I spent about 6-7 years doing that, and then went to the Naval War College. After that, I took a job as a liaison to the Navy staff. That's how I came to the Navy. I did that for about again in the mapping and cartography realm, but more in the satellite imagery realm. So when I became a liaison with the Navy, most of my work was devoted to remote sensing, satellite imagery, and that side of cartography and mapping, rather than the map making side. And then I think it was about 2010 is when I shifted over to Navy Science and Technology. Did that for about 9 or 10 years. At the tail end of that, became steeped in artificial intelligence, which leads me to where I am now. So I came over here. I've been in this job almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years, I think, in the March time frame. So that explains sort of how I got here. A rather odd trajectory. You won't find, it was not planned out that way. I don't think anybody, you can't, it's hard to replicate, but it worked for me. I certainly, I have very little regrets. I've been very happy with my career. I took a couple erratic turns in the initial stages, but I was able to, I think, do a good job at leveraging both the good and the bad, and steer myself to a course that I think is good for me, and I hope is good for the Navy and the nation as well. So.
Outstanding. I really appreciate that background. And when I listen to you, and then I look at sort of your portfolio, I'm rather amazed by when I talk to thought leaders like yourself. And I had several months ago, I had the opportunity to meet Patrick Rose and ONR Synthetic Biology Group, another sort of broad domain there. Your artificial intelligence portfolio, when sort of just looking through it, I mean, it's an extremely broad purview, everything from photonics to power and energy to quantum sciences. I've seen things from everything from how you control power on I guess an aircraft carrier to laser beams and so forth. Could you take us through a general overview of the AI office at ONR, and sort of, it's a silly question, but sort of how you decide to do what you do on any given day? When you come into the office, what do you decide to work on? Who your customers are? And then also, if you don't mind, because next week we're going to be meeting with somebody from the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, JAIC, how you liaise between the Navy and this sort of new area at the Pentagon that is sort of at the epicenter of all the AI that's going on.
Sure. So first, I'll tell you that the AI portfolio is really it could be the entire Navy portfolio. The potential of AI is literally infinite. Anything that involves information has a potential for AI application, and that's a good way to look at AI. I never start with AI. I always start with a problem or a challenge, and then inspect that, dissect that, and find is there an aspect of that problem, mission, or function, and a problem or a challenge associated with that lends itself to the application of AI? That gets me to what ends up in my job jar, really, in the AI priorities for the Navy. AI it's by its very nature an embedded technology. It's an enabling technology. It's not a standalone thing, at least in my eyes. So if you writ large, the way we do Navy technology, Navy science and technology is we examine our full range of capabilities. We look at them through several lenses: doctrine, organization, training, materiel, personnel, logistics, facilities. And some problems aren't solved by technology, obviously. They aren't technologic, problems. They may be solved by just doing things differently, right? Doctrine or organization. For those problems or challenges that are materiel based, that require technology to be developed and fielded, that's really where O&R comes in, Office of Naval Research. So we are working with the rest of the Navy staff to examine the capabilities the Navy brings to the nation to man, train, and equip a naval force. Focus on those issues or challenges or leap ahead opportunities that are technology focused or based, and then that's where we go in and go after that. So Dr. Rose and the other folks you mentioned at ONR are tackling those other technology-based areas that will either advance us in a certain sector or fill a gap or a need that we have. For AI, it's so you hit the nail right on the head. It's my purview is very broad. There's a lot going on. It's a very huge landscape. My bandwidth is a limiting factor. I wish I had an army of folks. I don't, but my job is really to help. I rely on a whole fleet of folks in the Navy. Again, since the potential is so broad, almost everybody working in those areas, I view as a partner, a potential partner or team member. So my job principally is to develop our strategy for where we apply AI, with what limited and valuable resources we have, and then make the connections between all the folks that need to come together to effectively develop those AI capabilities and field them and deploy them. For ONR, in our R&D portfolio, really there's probably two areas that represent a significant sectors of where we're really focused, or the lion's share of AI interest and development is right now. That would be, well, there's three. I'll say there's three. So one, we want to develop and apply AI to help reduce toil in the service, and that's in the fleet, in the back office. There are things we do as you and I and anybody that works in an office or works with spreadsheets or Microsoft Word, or any of those documents or digital tools. There are types of AI that can be used to just relieve dull, drudgery, repetitive tasks, right, and make us more efficient in our work day in, day out. That's one. Two would be the application of AI that fuels some level of autonomy in an unmanned system or program or platform somewhere. So an unmanned aerial vehicle, an unmanned surface vessel, an unmanned undersea vessel, robotics, right? What the general public would see as robotics. So AI that fuels some level of autonomy in an unmanned system. And then the last area is AI that fuels some stripe of decision aid. So it may be a piece of code or something that manifests itself in an aid to the human in making a decision. Not making the decision for the human, but helping a human make a better, faster decision by more effectively sifting through information, helping the humans nug through what could be a rather heavy set of data or fast flowing information, right? And making sense of it faster in a more effective way. So really those are the three bigger, and those three areas, they unpack, you'd be surprised, they unpack into a lot of different features and programs and elements that are in play in the Navy today. But if at a high level, what I can discuss with you, that's a pretty good, those three buckets are pretty good representation of where we're focused on applying AI.
Excellent.
Oh, and the Jake, I forgot about the Jake. So if you look at what we're doing with AI, the Navy has actually been involved with AI since the inception of the discipline in the 50s, 60s. I think you'd be surprised. You mentioned ONR's roots go back to the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
We, in the 80s, the Navy established the Navy Center for Applied Research in Artificial Intelligence. It's at the Naval Research Lab. It's not far from here, across the Potomac, at the Naval Research Lab. That's where our AI experts live day to day. That's where our 80,000-pound brains on AI reside. And they're a crucial part of my team. So anyone in the Navy that needs help with AI expertise, those are the guys I reach out to and bring into the conversation. They've been involved and engaged with the development of the National AI Strategy, the DoD AI Strategy, and the development and stand up and implementation of the Joint AI Center, right? But so why do we need a Joint AI Center or something like that? Mm-hmm. We have if you look across the Department of Defense, you see a very similar condition to the Navy and I think the other services. For years, we've been working, really smart folks have been working on AI within their little part of the world of their silo. But if you really want to put the throttle over on AI and realize economies at scale at a level where you're really, really moving out on AI at a corporate and enterprise-wide level, those many folks need to be, there are certain resources that they could and should be sharing as they develop and use AI. Data, algorithms, models, catalogs, other tools. Long story short, what the Jake provides is an environment and a set of resources to help anyone working in the department share those assets, right? So that's how we start to really scale AI in the department and take it up out of a singular application space into a broad, and start cross-pollinating, lessons learned, algorithms, so folks don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, in other areas. We can reuse and leverage and just create an environment that spreads the knowledge and the resources across the enterprise. So Jake's been up and running for a couple of years now. We have Navy and Marine Corps folks that sit at the Jake and help that place run. I work with them to make sure the Navy can best effectively leverage the both technologic resources that Jake provides, but I think more importantly, the knowledge capital that they provide. They also provide, so they're like a management and consultant AI firm for the Department of Defense for all the services, right? Mm-hmm. So we work with them routinely. I've worked with those folks since they stood up, and not a day goes by that I don't talk to somebody at the Jake about either a specific initiative or a way to better equip the Navy for AI. So I guess that's probably and if you look in their portfolio, you'll see, going back to my roots, some of the work they've been doing recently, just to give an example, AI, computer vision types of AI for humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, the fires out in California, right? So, so using satellite imagery to more effectively map those fires and figure out where they are, where they're headed, who's at risk, things like that. That was the topic of my graduate research paper, actually, the remediation of natural hazards and disasters through remote sensing and geographic information systems. So it's funny, when over the course of my career, I kind of went away from mapping and satellite imagery, and when I came to the Navy and took on the S&T job, and I haven't gone back there much since. But now, one of the most mature and talked about types of AI is that computer vision algorithm stripe of AI that's applied to satellite imagery. So I'm kind of, in some respects, going right back to where I came from at a certain part of my career.
Very cool. Really cool stuff. Continuing along those lines, I mean, obviously, that's one type of application that I was near and dear to you, and makes a lot of sense, both from a naval perspective, but also for sort of dual use, say for the American public and so forth. Other, to the extent you can talk about them, other interesting technologies. You mentioned some of the unmanned stuff. I don't know if that just means drones, or can you make an aircraft carrier go on its own and do stuff? Other areas that you can talk about that aren't top secret or whatever, that you're most excited about looking out, say, the next 5 years or so.
Yeah. So, can you make care, fully autonomous? I think at some point you probably could. Folks in the commercial sector are looking at fully autonomous freighters. The big freight ships. They're certainly headed that way. But for us in the Navy, for the foreseeable future, our intent with AI is not to replace humans, but rather make them better, augment them. There are certainly some platforms where taking a human out of the loop is advantageous and desired, where it's a very dangerous, or it's an environment that's, for one reason or another, very risky to a human. Down in the depth of the ocean is a very dangerous place to work. If we can take the human out of that loop and do a better job with an unmanned platform, we plan to do that. The biggest thing I can tell you is that, it's some people do, I think, probably mistakenly think there's a big effort to replace humans wholesale. I don't view it that way. Part of my strategic objective is to fully augment or optimize the humans through the use and the application of artificial intelligence. That could manifest itself in an unmanned partner to a human. That might be a pilot in a plane who has an unmanned aircraft alongside of him, helping out with part of his mission. It could be an unmanned vessel at sea. You mentioned a carrier. We're not looking at a fully autonomous carrier yet, but we do have Sea Hunter, which is a rather large vessel. It's a little over 100 feet. It's a ship. It's an unmanned ship. It's intended to be fully autonomous and unmanned. We're working our way there. I think the key for AI is, if you look at the drones that are flying around today and a lot of the unmanned systems and platforms, very few of them are fully autonomous. They're either remotely piloted or they have some level of autonomy. That amping up that level of autonomy in those systems and really taking true advantage of their potential is one of the things that's exciting to me for AI. You're not going to do that without AI. The better, the more sophisticated your AI, the better, more capable and sophisticated the autonomy in an unmanned system will be. So I am excited about seeing all those remotely piloted things, or things that still pretty much require either a single or several people to operate. And a lot of them still do. You'd be surprised. We call them unmanned, but there's a lot of men and women working to make those things operate. I'm excited to see us relieve those folks where we can, where it makes sense, and let those systems really break out and create true advantage and potential for us. And also on the decision aid side, I'm excited about there's a lot of people talk about the wealth of information that exists in the world today, and the ever increasing number of everything that is a sensor that can start collecting data now. If you look at it, our lives are just replete with devices that pull in data. Mm-hmm. I'm excited about the AI algorithms that can help us sift through and leverage that information in better ways, faster, across the board, whether that's in a ship at sea or in the back office or everywhere in between. You're a dismounted Marine or a Navy SEAL, all of that. It's very exciting to me. So there's not a lot of areas I can tell you about. Sea Hunter's one of them that makes a lot of the news. It's out there. DARPA, that project started out at DARPA. Okay. ONR's recently acquired it, now manages it. But there's a lot of other efforts like that. But that's in a nutshell. Again, I fall back to, it's either we're trying to reduce toil for the human, raise the level of autonomy in an unmanned system for many different reasons or purposes, or a decision aid. And just one more example on the unmanned system.
Please.
If I can take a robot and build that robot so it can scrape the barnacles off the hull of a ship while it's in port, I'll bet the guy that had that job before that would love to be relieved of that duty or that job, and would welcome the introduction of a robot or an unmanned system that can do that job close to what the human could. Just close, good enough to be good. So,
absolutely. Anyway. I think you use AI to figure out what to do with the barnacles. There might be some.
There you go.
Some use for it one day.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier, Brett, the Naval Research Lab, which is sort of your internal sort of corporate research lab at the Navy. I also, when I read at the ONR website, you also do a lot of collaboration with universities and other laboratories. And I've also seen this in some of my discussions with like some of the folks at DARPA and at the Ensign Group. Do you carry out a lot of external partnered research on AI with say other universities? And then if you do, are there any interesting surprises of different labs or universities in the United States that are really good at naval artificial intelligence applications that we may not normally think of? Is there a group in like Iowa somewhere that's really good at creating? I don't know, I'm just pulling that out of the sky, but please.
Yeah. So so the actually, a lot of people would probably be surprised that not a lot, probably none of the actual research gets done here at ONR. We're more of not an investment firm, but maybe we
like
write
venture
the check,
capitalist, yeah.
right, yeah. We decide what gets worked on. We write the checks, and then what we call performers actually do the work, the research. Those performers. We have government performers, we have academia are a set of our performers, and industry are our performers, right? So when we award a contract or grant, it's typically either, it could be done at the Naval Research Lab. That's our in-house performer set, right? Inside the Office of Naval Research. They're our lab. But it could be done by another lab somewhere else in the Navy. In the government side, it could be done at one of our university accredited research centers, our UARCs. like Johns Hopkins
Mhm.
or University of Hawaii, University of Texas, uh, um, and I'll highlight one of those. Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab is they're doing a lot of work in AI. They're doing some very interesting work in artificial intelligence for the Navy. Another one that recently has got me pretty excited. Our Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane, out in Indiana. You said Iowa, but it's close. Indiana.
Okay.
There, you wouldn't think,
Yeah.
a Navy lab in Indiana, but they're doing some really interesting and compelling AI related work out there, especially in the area of how we perceive the electromagnetic spectrum and leverage that and sift through that type of information and data. So, and they just recently, we just put or established at Crane the I'm going to get this name wrong, but I think it's called ARI, the AI readiness infrastructure. It's a high performance compute asset and resource that is that any Navy developer or researcher working on AI can leverage, but it's housed at NSWC Crane right now. And then our I would be and Carnegie Mellon. We actually have we have an active education partnership agreement with Carnegie Mellon. Of course, they're one of the nation's premier academic institutions for AI research. We work with them in several areas. Their Software Engineering Institute, which has for years been helping the government and the DoD do a better job of developing and deploying software and computers. They came about, in the years when a while ago when we were building and flying jets, and got to the point where we realized we're really not so much building and flying jets as we are building and flying computers, and we needed to think of them being engineered that way. That was sort of the genesis of the Carnegie Mellon SEI. So we work with them on actually, it's a fascinating line of effort called AI engineering. In other words, what does the discipline of AI look like? It's really to a lot of people, it's a dark art. It's this mysterious alchemy, right? It's part software engineering. It's part math and stats and code. And how do you bring all the pieces together? How do you write the code? How do you develop AI? How do you deploy it? There's really no formal discipline. So we're working with Carnegie to do that, to examine the discipline of AI and start codifying the skill sets, the expertise, the knowledge someone would need. And then, like, we have general engineering principles, software engineering principles. What are the AI engineering principles that we should be mindful of and be employing as we do AI? So that's one area of Carnegie Mellon. And then there's another area that I work closely with that works strategy and national security. So I use the folks there as a sanity check when I develop Navy AI strategy. I use Carnegie Mellon, that strategic office, to kind of, am I on the right course? Am I, going to stray here? Those guys have both the national security gray matter as well as their heavy duty AI experts as well. And then I'd be really remiss if I didn't mention, to round out our set of performers, is industry. They're super critical. That's where a lot of the advancements in AI are today. They're the leading edge. The reason we're seeing a lot of AI today, and you hear about AI, and it's in our lives now, is really based on breakthroughs that industry has made over the last decade in things like big data analytics, improved algorithms, and parallel computing, cheap parallel processing. Those three breakthroughs really unleashed AI on the world over the last decade or so. So now that's what's driving your Netflix recommender, or the Google search engines, or your Amazon, your Tesla. When Tesla
Sure.
the car breaks down, they can send out a patch that goes to all the vehicles that they've built and deployed. I mean, that kind of AI is it's been exciting to watch, but those successes are born largely on the back of advancements in industry over the last decade or so. So industry is a critical partner for us in how we both not just develop and deploy the technology itself, but for me, how we change the way, and I'm talking as government now, as a federal person who's, the Navy is a largely industrial animal.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the process of shifting to a digital animal, right? That's not where our comfort zone right now. We're still learning that. We have a lot of organizational process and cultural related changes to make to be successful in AI. For me, the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity and the keystone for us being successful in AI is more cultural than it is technological, for sure. But I look at industry, and when I talk to a Google or an Amazon, I spend most of my time talking with them about how do you decide what to work on? Once you've decided, what does that project team look like? What are they doing? How does it operate? How does an idea rise in the organization? Where do you divest? Where do you invest? How do you decide to go left, right, or forward on something, or maybe stop doing something? Right? We are, and I think the whole government is traditionally notoriously bad about stopping, killing, projects or programs. There's an aversion, right?
Sure.
We're stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, so we don't. It's not in our nature to work on something for 5 years and then toss it to the side, or that's just not in our nature. But I think where AI is concerned, we have to start thinking in those terms to be more nimble and agile and flexible and more dynamic digital denizens to get AI right.
Absolutely. Brett, earlier on, you mentioned, I think it was one of your professors who was a major influence on you in terms of the cartography work. To me, this wrap-up question about other important mentors, influencers, and they can be professors you've had, but obviously you've met probably a wide range of people in government, at the Pentagon, in industry, as you liaise with these different groups. Take some time, if you would, to mention, shout out to other important people in these initiatives that have been really key in crafting your leadership of these programs.
Yeah. So I mentioned Richard Palmieri. He's passed away several years ago, but he's just a really wonderful guy, and is in our seminars and everything, he was not only a brilliant man, I think, his focus was human geography. So he loved focusing and researching the Nepalese people and on that culture. And interestingly enough, I just thought he's probably had this impact or effect on me. I didn't even realize it, but when I sit down, like especially in the winter, to watch sports, it's tough now. I'm a big baseball fan. I like baseball. That's what I'll watch day in, day out when they're playing. But now I watch skiing, and I like anything to do with mountains, mountaineering, and skiing, especially downhill skiing. And probably at some point that's one of those connections that was made. But he was just an all-around great guy, terrific, fascinating individual. He went to Nepal several times over his career, spent a lot of time there, and it was his the way he cherished the people of Nepal was the thing that struck me. That he just loved the people, the culture there, and it made everything else he taught us very interesting and engaging. So he was one. My research professor Bjorn Gunnarsson, who was a volcanologist from Iceland. He grew up in Iceland. He played a very significant role in my career in the later stages. And obviously, he was my advisor on my research project. But not a lot of, the person that ever said no man's an island, they definitely didn't talk to me. I'm the world's worst introvert. I get my energy from, thinking and being within myself for the most part. I'll take a fire and a good book any day over a dinner party or something else, or, to my wife's chagrin, a play or a show or something.
Sounds like me.
So I don't actively, I don't have any real mentors. I don't have a big set of folks who had a direct influence on me. But today, I would have to, mention our previous Chief of Naval Research, Admiral David Hahn. He had a terrific influence on me. I wouldn't be here talking to you today were it not for him reaching out to me when I was at OpNav. And when I was in OpNav, I was pretty much set to retire there in that job, more than likely on that track with the Navy staff. Until Admiral Hahn approached me, and he actively, I guess, recruited me to come over and lead the AI portfolio for him over here at the Office of Naval Research. He is an interesting individual. He's not a gigantic physical specimen of a man, but he has an absolute command presence when he walks in a room. I dealt with him several times in my previous job, and he always took pride in being a disruptor and having a disruptive effect, but I think it was always for the better. I was in a meeting with members of Congress once with him, and they asked him to describe himself, and he said, "I like to describe myself as the grit in the oyster." You're going to get a pearl at the end of the day, but there's going to be some friction there on the way. So that comment always stuck with me. But if were it not for him bringing me over here, and he was a great man to work for, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have this job, or and this job I consider to be surely the capstone or the pinnacle of my career, more than likely. There is a lot of work to do ahead of me. I don't want to leave it until I think I've made a significant amount of headway for the service, because I think it is important. I think there's a lot of impact that AI can have on the way that the Navy operates and the way our sailors and Marines think and operate. And I'm forever thankful to Admiral Hahn for pushing me out of my comfort zone and bringing me over into this position. So that's kind of maybe boring. I don't have a set of it's Richard Branson or this or whatever, yeah. But there's it just struck me. I was I just like I said, I'm an introvert, and I love reading. You mentioned the War College. There's a whole host of professors that I ran across there. That was a fabulous year in my career. I learned a ton about national security decision making, the way the military operates and works and thinks. And one thing I loved there was the part of the curriculum there is the deep examination of history. I love history as well. So I'm a big fan of working for the Navy Midway. Sure. A lot of my projects are named after planes that were at Midway, Devastator, Avenger. There's a telltale influence there. And if I go back in history to think of influencers, Nimitz, sure. Spruance, both had a role in it. Nimitz's his guidance of, to the forces deploying for the Battle of Midway. You'll be guided by the principle of calculated risk. It's brilliant in its simplicity, but it's the folks knew exactly what the guardrails they had, and he just let them go and operate. I love that as a leader. And Spruance was, he's an introvert he was an introvert like us. He was a very quiet man, but wow, what a set of stones on him to make the decision he made, to launch those planes, knowing they might not come back or they were at the edge of their range, and then the whole impact that one episode had on the trajectory of our Navy and the nation in World War II it's fascinating to me. So I gravitate to folks like that. On the more artistic side, I like Hemingway and Da Vinci too. Da Vinci because I'm a multidisciplinary guy. I was a liberal arts major. I like pulling from a bunch of other disciplines to find leap ahead intersections or places where you can create a step change. A big fan of the book, The Medici Effect. I believe firmly and deeply in that. So Leonardo was an artist, obviously a terrific artist, but a brilliant man, all sorts. That just fascinates me. But so that's it, I guess. I know could probably go on, but that's probably good enough for now. But hope
it's fascinating, and it's funny. I have a book somewhere around here called "Learning from Leonardo," and it's interesting how much he studied the water. He got a lot of his early inspiration about flow and the way, whether it's the human body or the oceans or whatever. He was a fascinating guy, and you'd be surprised how many times people bring up Leonardo da Vinci as a major influencer. So that's not unheard of. It's really, really fascinating stuff, Brett. And I mean, as you said, you have a lot to do, and I'm really wishing you the best with all this, and an amazing portfolio. Going to keep an eye on it. And for everybody that's going to be watching this episode or listening in the podcast, you've been listening to Brett Vaughan, the United States Navy's Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer and the Artificial Intelligence Portfolio Manager at the Office of Naval Research. Brett, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us and tell us everything that you're doing. Thanks for doing it and keeping the country safe. And as we say, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow. It's really quite fascinating listening to you and envisioning what's going to be coming next in the coming years. Really a great time.
Thank you, Ira. My pleasure. Take care.